after we had this Shaharit service, and we did Kiddush, and the Kiddush was all stories about how my father prayed to the Rebbe, and Hashem bring him this dream, and this happened, and this other testimony about, hey, how I went to the Rebbe's tomb, and prayed to the Rebbe, and the Rebbe answered me. And I was like, oh my goodness, what am I? Then, I'm very fond to Chabad, but I never been in that scenario, hearing those kind of testimonies. Oh my goodness, I feel so out of place, because I've been condemning that as a pastor in my past, and when I come from, we're very against the belief system, is very against anything. They don't believe in the Trinity. They don't believe in things like smell like idolatry. So when you see all these testimonies, I was like, is this is kosher? Is it not kosher? What's happening here?
I actually walked on Shabbos on the yurt side, Gibel Thomas, all the way to the right. 9 mile walk from where I live here in Nassau all the way to Queens.
Well, it should be a kapara for you. Look, I'm not saying that these mystical ideas are necessarily bad. I'm just saying that by the simple fact that they contradict each other, it means that they're optional to believe. So all I'm saying is that they're optional. And this, of course, I mean, like if Chabadniks in the room, he'd be like, "How dare you?" Da 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 da. Because the average rabbi will not only not say that they're optional, but they'll say that they're all good and uplifting and represent Torah. Because in Judaism, no one wants to step on anyone's toes. I'm just saying, let's make a distinction. This is why people have a problem with what's called oral law, because they think that all this is part of the oral law. Praying to dead rabbis or through dead rabbis is part of oral law. This has nothing to do with the oral law. These are just customs that crept in throughout the ages. Shligan Kapporis, swinging chickens on your head for Yom Kippur. There's rabbis who condemn this, the Rashba, condemn the practice. Only because it's done by Jews does not mean that it's part of Torah, especially when other rabbis are attacking it. But of course, if you only get your dose of Judaism from 4 internet rabbis who pretty much agree on everything, you're just going to get part of the story. You guys have to go in and start looking for many different rabbis, gather all these different opinions, and then you'll get an understanding on how disunited Judaism is in terms of non-halachic issues. And that's fine. We don't have to agree on mystical things. You can accept it from a devotional perspective, but you can't say Torah teaches and quote your mystical idea. That's the problem, and this is why.
When I was hearing all the testimonies, this story came to my mind when Sabbatai Sevi he invited the Rabbanim of his community to a wedding, and when the people came to the wedding was he was going to marry the Sefer Torah. That was the because he was Mashiach, and he was going to marry the Sefer Torah in the synagogue. That's history. That's the history of Sabbatai Sevi. And Asher can explain who was him. And so when I heard these testimonies on Shabbat, last Shabbat, it was happening.
Right. So Shabtai Tzvi was a false messianic figure. He has followers who believe that he's coming back because he was converted to Islam because the Sultan gave him the option of death or conversion, and then he took conversion. But he had some real twisted ideas of actually saying that God allows and encourages us to sin. It's very similar also, to Jacob Frank and the Frankists. Mysticism, when accepted as something directly from God and divinely inspired and something that's authoritative on every Jew to believe, ultimately hurts more than it helps. I have a video explaining why praying at graves is wrong. Not to mention that the Rambam in Hilchos Aval clearly says that it's not allowed to pray Arba Amos from a kever. But if you're applying any redemptive qualities to a cadaver, now, granted, the vast majority of knowledgeable Jews who pray. I'm not saying the dummies who can't articulate what they believe, but the vast majority who actually go to the Old Hell, to the tomb of the Rebbe and pray, will acknowledge that they're not praying to the Rebbe, but rather they're praying through him or in the merit of him. Now, he's not there. I mean, this is just like dust and bones and this and that. But you're applying redemptive qualities to a cadaver, saying that in the merit of this individual, God should listen to me. Now, like, if that was truly the case, you could do it from your house. I mean, why do you have to be at the actual grave? And if that was also the case, like, why is it that there's hundreds and hundreds of letters on top of the grave of the Rebbe for him to answer? And when you write a letter to the Rebbe, you go into this little room, and then there's someone there who gives you a response from another letter that he had written earlier. And I remember there was this family we converted from Guatemala, and there aren't too many places to send someone to learn in America if you're a girl. There aren't too many seminaries for women here, but one of the more notable ones is Mahon Khana, the girls' school in Crown Heights. But it's a Chabad school. So then we told this girl, we told her that be very careful. These people are Meshichists and they believe that the Rebbe is the Messiah. She's like, no, don't worry. I believe in the Judaism you represent and all this stuff. Long story short, 2 months after that, she doesn't talk to me anymore because she's a Meshachist now. And she broke down crying to me on the phone before, and then she told me that she wrote a letter to the Rebbe, and the Rebbe responded, and all this stuff. And this was someone who was initially a rational Jew. It's very corrosive in many cases.
The problem is that they're using miracles to believe in him, and that's exactly what Rambam condemned in Hilchot Melachim. Not to believe in a Messiah candidate because of miracles, because when he says that when Rabbi Akiva declared Bar Kosiba the Messiah, he didn't ask any miracle from him. That's what he explained in Hilchot Melachim in Mishneh Torah, and so it's right the opposite. That they're believing in the Rebbe because of the miracles and signs.
Right.
So then we should believe in Yeshu. I'm at this point in my life. I'm not in a like a to create more division and more machlochet, right? If they want to be, if the Jewish world is okay at this point of history with that, and they tolerate it and looks like that, well, so fine. But that creates a precedent that then other like Messianics, right? They have the same right to be halachic Jews.
That's right.
And it's they creating the precedent for that.
That's a good comparison.
I just want to say real quick, I just want to welcome the new people to the room, Rose and Saruk. Thank you.
Saruk in the house.
Hey, how you doing, Asher?
All right, Saruk lives in Israel, but it's first thing in the morning over there. All right, so you're an early riser.
That's cool. Right.
But like Ronaldo was saying, if there's nothing wrong with what Chabad does with the whole Yechi thing, how can someone condemn a Messianic Jew, let's say, who doesn't believe that JC is God, even though Chabad does have the whole notion of the Rebbe being the Yatzmut in a goof, basically the divine essence in bodily form, which is what appears in the book of Colossians. Anyways, my issue with Chabad has nothing to do really with the whole Yechi thing, but it's more built on the first and the second parak of the Tanya. But anyways, I know Saruk has something for me. He came here for a fight.
No. I only
Let's do it.
To feel the truth, that's for sure. First of all, I want to say that I think that you've made a very good and clear distinction. If a person believes in the Torah, even if they have some crazy idea, like the state of Israel is absolutely forbidden to exist, or, such and such a person is the Messiah, if they don't stray into the halachic realm of danger, like saying that he's, God's essence in the body or any kind of foolish thing like that, then I actually think that he definitely...
I don't think that's problematic either. No, I've never called Chabad idolatrous. I've never called them idolatrous.
First of all, look, it's not idolatrous. It's about what's incorrect, and therefore, in some cases, I don't think it's really an issue of idolatry. A person could have an incorrect idea about God's existence which is prohibited, but we wouldn't call him an idol worshiper. For
Idolatry in Hebrew is not idol worship; it's foreign worship.
okay,
Avodah zarah has nothing to do
Yeah.
with avodat
no, but
pesilim.
I'm saying that for instance, the Rambam says that if a person says that a particular man is
Hey, that's Rambam. Yeah, and the
okay,
Ravid
no, but I'm
disagree
saying
with him, and Chazal disagree
no,
with
no,
him.
no. That's not my point. My point is that
Okay.
the category, when people use the term idol worship, I think they misunderstand. That's why I'm bringing this up. They misunderstand what it is that's being discussed. Having incorrect ideas about God's existence can stray into forbidden categories that are not necessarily bowing down to a stone idol, which most people today would say, "Oh my God, that's so stupid."
If mentioned by Chazal, if not mentioned, it falls into gray area, which is why I don't believe that the Elokistim, there are groups specifically in Kafar Chabad that believe the Rebbe is God. I myself would not call that idolatry. I would call it foolish. This is why I made a post once that something could be wrong, something could be horrible, and not be idolatrous nor
Correct.
heretical. You
Correct.
know, it's because people throw these words around nowadays and they don't know that they have huge consequences. But because we don't have a Sanhedrin nowadays, everyone could call me a heretic and everyone could call me an idolater or that I endorse idolatry because there's no consequences for calling someone that. If
That's
someone
right.
would call you a heretic or an idolater during the times of the Sanhedrin and it wasn't true, you would be put to death. Saruk,
Yes.
I want to delve in forbidden territory here.
Okay, good.
Okay,
It's the only interesting place to go.
that's how we do it. That's how we do it. Okay, so I give a lot of courtesy over to Chabad and people who teach Kabbalah by not calling them heretics and not calling them idolaters, although I disagree with them. And I have to reiterate the idea that something could be wrong and horrific and stupid to the 100th degree and not heretical nor idolatrous.
I agree with you.
Okay, so this is why I don't consider many Messianic Jews idolaters. Although I consider them wrong and I consider them silly, I do not consider them heretical nor idolaters.
And I agree with that 100%.
Even if they believe that God embodied a man for 33 years. For the same reason that if a Lubavitcher believes that a Rebbe is the Atzmut, the divine essence in bodily form, that could be silly, in my opinion, according to the understanding that the Rambam laid down for us, which is ultimately his opinion that I embrace. Okay, I understand it's silly. However, according to what's laid down to us in the Talmud and to the Peshat level of Tanakh, it's not idolatrous nor heretical.
Okay, so there's really only three real ramifications for this discussion, and you've really covered already most of it. First of all, there's no Sanhedrin, so nobody's judging anybody because nobody can judge anybody.
Or people are judging them.
No,
but without authority.
I mean, when I use the term judge, I actually mean real judging, meaning not opinions and not stupidity. I'm talking about there's no court in Israel today that can, for instance, well, I don't want to digress. I'll say, so there's no Sanhedrin, so nobody's judging anybody. And it really just falls on the individual to decide, well, I wouldn't drink this person's wine, or I wouldn't count this person in my minyan. But otherwise, practically in Judaism, there is no ramification today to anything anybody believes because we're all basically operating as individuals who happen to talk about being part of a nation. But there's very little actual real national reality here. So the fact is that it's just a nice discussion, and your opinion is very strong, but it's just an opinion at this point because there's no ramifications. Right. I just want to say,
we don't count people in a minyan. In many cases, we don't consider them Jewish. We don't consider them valid witnesses. I mean, these are huge ramifications when it comes.
Well, but so that's my whole point is that when you say we don't consider somebody to be a valid witness, there is no witnessing today, so it doesn't matter. In other words, I think it's an important point you're bringing up because I think one of the things
for conversion, there's witnesses. For handing over a get, there's a witness.
First of all, for a conversion and things like that, in essence, it's only a convention, meaning that they're really not acting as witnesses vis-a-vis the Sanhedrin concept. Let me just finish.
Okay.
Today, the conversion process, again, I'm not saying it's not real. I'm just saying that the reason why we have such a huge mess up in the conversion field, which you've talked about very much, is basically because people do not understand what's going on. Meaning, even in the Orthodox world, people think you can validate or invalidate or this or that. The fact is, it's all convention. When somebody today converts and you get a beit din of 3 people and he goes in or she goes in the mikveh and they do the brit, essentially we're just accepting that this process is going on because since there is no real authority, nobody really can say anything one way or the other. But so when you say that today we use witnesses for conversion, I actually disagree. I don't think that we're using witnesses for conversion, because since there is no Sanhedrin, there's no real validity to any of these acts.
The Sanhedrin was never involved with anything that had to do with conversion in terms of authorizing it or not allowing it.
I didn't say it did. I said that.
Right. No, I'm saying that even though there is no Sanhedrin, the role of the witness still stands.
Let me give you an example.
Also for monetary matters.
See, that's the whole thing, because monetary matters, it's very clear that all courts today operate on the concept of a willingness to arbitration. There isn't any real din Torah anymore. So that, for instance, if two people show up at a court today and Shimon says, Levi owes me $100, and Levi says, no, you don't, the court isn't going to decide and say, oh, Levi, you are chayav to pay him or else. They're going to say, listen, this is what we think is going on. Please pay him because convention says we should have it this way. That ultimately, there is no
convention.
real...
I mean, they have the power of Hiram. They can put you in Nidui.
Look.
First of all, no one's put to death for monetary matters. Like, you don't need smicha to adjudicate cases of monetary matters.
I'm talking about the idea that...
Yeah, we're talking about the Sanhedrin. But the Sanhedrin only has authority via smicha. But anyways, are you willing to agree with me? According to the argument I just made, that Messianic Jews are not considered idolaters or heretics?
Yes, I agree with you. Well, excepting, like I said, in the case where I believe...
Now, mind you, this is being recorded.
No, I'm saying if a person says, let me just go, because I just said yes to something. Let me just qualify it. There could be cases where if a person ascribes godliness to another person, whether they're Chabad or Messianic, that could stray into something that I would call forbidden. But otherwise, I agree with you. I think that a person who clearly says, I accept that, Yeshua was not God, and he was the Messiah. He's the Son of God. He's this, supernally high, neshama, whatever other terms they might want to apply.
That's not what I said.
Like the Ebionites. The Ebionites believe that Yeshua was a kind of Messiah, but they rejected Paul, and there's some modern groups they call themselves modern Ebionites.
That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about someone who believes that the God of Israel embodied Basar V'Dam for 33 years.
Okay, so they're wrong, and they may have a personal prohibition between them and God. I don't reject them from Israel if they're Jewish.
Fine.
Even Chabadnikim, in other words, a person like, for instance, you mentioned the Elokistim, which, by the way, started in Tzfat, not in Kfar Chabad. The Elokistim, the people in Chabad that are saying that the Rebbe, once he died, his neshama became one with God, and now he is God. God forbid such an idea. The point is that whether or not they're straying into the prohibited, that's between them and God at this point, because there is no Sanhedrin to judge them. But as an individual, I say that I'm not concerned with what the exact prohibition in the Torah is. The idea is something which we have to say is forbidden to be spouting off that stupidity. Whether you say, like you say, it's just a really wrong thing to say, it's stupid, or in my case, I would say that it's very misleading and it leads people into things which are incorrect, which could stray into prohibition. And the fact is, we're in agreement. It's wrong. And like I said, since there's no Sanhedrin judging them, I don't care exactly what the nature of the issue is.
Okay.